It's China, maritime issues, contemporary developments, which will be chaired by Commodore Vasan. Briefly introduce Commodore, who I've known for several years now during our programs together. Commodore Seshadri Vasan, who retired after serving the Indian Navy, is head Strategy and Security Studies Center for Asia Studies. And he's also, of course, as you know, the director of the Chennai Center for China Studies and regional director of the National Maritime Foundation, Tamil Nadu. An alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College and the College of Naval Warfare, Commodore Vasan has had a distinguished career spanning more than 34 years. His wide-ranging appointments, both at sea and ashore, include command of warships, appointment in the carrier-borne wing of INS Vikrant, the command of long-range maritime reconnaissance anti-submarine warfare squadron, member examiner of the Aircrew Categorization and Standardization Board, Chief Staff Officer Operations at the Southern Naval Command, and a director at the Naval Aviation Staff at the Naval Headquarters in charge of Air Ops and Training. He commissioned a major naval air station, INS Rajali, close to the east coast of India, and commanded another air station, INS Garuda, on the west coast. He was on the faculty for over 2 years at the Naval War College that trained senior level officers from all the three services. Commodore Vasan was on deputation to the Indian Coast Guard from 2000 to 2003 as the Eastern Regional Commander with maritime jurisdiction in the Bay of Bengal, including the Indo-Bangladesh maritime border and the Indo-Sri Lanka maritime border. Over to you, Commodore. We look forward to a stimulating opening session.
It's a great pleasure again to be here chairing this session. There are three wonderful speakers, all of them who I have known personally. And, Dr. Vijay Sakuja, I was formerly with the Navy. And, in fact, when I migrated to the think tank business, I joined him in Observe Research Foundation. That was way back in 2005. And, we have been in touch ever since. Now, Vijay Sakuja has got a wonderful career. I have no intention of reading through his CV in the interest of time. And therefore, I will hand over to Vijay Sakuja right away and, request him to stick to about 20 minutes. And because of the fact that I was unable to introduce the topic, I will allow Dr. Vijay Sakuja to start off, and I'll intervene towards the end of the session. This will also have a question answer session, and the format for Q&A is that it will only be typed in the chat box and nobody will be allowed to speak. And thereafter, Bala and Aishwarya will ensure that the questions are directed to the right people. Over to you, Vijay. Vijay, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've gone blind now.
No worries. We can see your presentation. We can see you also. You go ahead.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Commodore, for this very kind introduction. And I must compliment the organizers for hosting this and inviting me to this conference, webinar rather. And one moment. I will just...
the first test slide is on. You can go to, the next one is on. You can go to full screen.
All right. Can you hear, can you see
Yes.
all this?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Perfect now.
All right. Okay. Well, let me suggest, making an initial remark. Last few months have been quite turbulent. And there's been a fair amount of churning, if I may use the word, in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, particularly the Western Pacific. And this is this churn is featuring coercion, intimidation, saber rattling, strategic signaling, and naval maneuvers. And on display, what we've seen is rather, we should say, we've been treated to multiple carrier operations, and that is by the US. And the PLA Navy has been perhaps more ambitious, and they've conducted simultaneous maneuvers in all the seas, the Yellow Sea, the East Sea, the South China Sea. And not to be left behind, the Quad members too have conducted their exercises. I think this is a very unusual period. And if I may suggest that in recent times, after the Gulf War, we are witnessing intense naval saber rattling, as we can see in the Western Pacific. Amongst the most spectacular one that I noticed is the firing of the DF-21D from Zhejiang province and DF-26 from Qinghai into the South China Sea. This was in response to the entry of US pipelanes into the Chinese promulgated no-fly zone in the Bohai Bay. You can see that on the slide. The ranges are there. Although the missile firing took place in August, it was only this month that China announced that these missiles had hit the moving target. This literally, although the Americans were well familiar of the capabilities, but they were literally rattled, and it was not surprising for Admiral Davidson to remark at the Halifax Forum, China will test more missiles, conventional nuclear associated missiles this year than any other nation has added to. I think this is a good signalese to that extent. The timing of the missile announcement is also noticeable, given that the Quad members at that time were conducting their exercises in the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. And it was also the right time for the Chinese to let it known that the carrier formations were in their crosshair. Be that as it may, the Chinese Navy has arrived on the global scene and is bristling with weapons and sensors and is ready to challenge the US supremacy at sea. I think we can give a lot of credit to Chinese, top shipbuilding nation with capacity and capability to build all classes of naval ships. If you look at this little tablet that I've created, and you look at the US Navy, figures may change, they vary from different sources. What would interest us is 2015 to 2020. And if we were to go by this figure, we find 105 ships have been built, which is phenomenal. The figures are true or not, but very fact that they reflect a certain sense of urgency amongst the Chinese to build a powerful navy. And if you go on to 2025 to 2030, you find just about 25 ships will be added. And in between, 2027, the centennial. Whatever these figures may suggest, I think they claim to about 360 ships and submarines and 130 major surface combatants. Our projection and expeditionary capability. And the moment I put them together with the Americans or the US Navy and put them side by side, I think we always say the Chinese put out things with Chinese characteristics. I think they're doing the Chinese characteristics, but they have a role model of the United States. These are some other figures. The aircraft carrier, you have the submarines, you have the surface forces, 2019, the new LHA, helicopter carrier, and then, of course, destroyers. And these are figures that will be very, very, I think you can give them a lot of credit, and they are indeed, by all counts, very, very impressive. The Chinese defense budget, this merits our attention. That's been going on, notwithstanding the fact the GDP has always been, I mean, it is not a decline, it is still very substantive. 6% goes to the large economy. It's phenomenal. I think there is enough money available in terms of investment into military. And if one compares with the 2009 figures, the tablet on the right-hand side, I think the United States is well ahead. You look at China, I think they exceed buying of literally the next 3. I also want to make a brief reference to the Chinese marine economy and in which fit in shipbuilding and a whole lot of other things. Gross ocean product rose by 6.2%, and I think they'll be put at about $1.2 trillion. I think these are phenomenal figures. We have to give a lot of credit. The Chinese have invested, whether it be naval affairs or it is in the ocean. I think they are leaders in those many terms. They have substantive all the credits of being a major maritime power, which is continuously building. Look at the strategy. I mean, this is one of the features, one of the important issues that I've been asked to talk about, and I look at it very carefully, and I'll be very brief. Chinese, I think I'll give them a two-pronged approach in terms of their strategy. One is for the Pacific Ocean, the near seas defense, and the far seas. Recall the first island chain and the second island chain. You see that on the tablet on the left-hand side. And I've juxtaposed that with the DF missile. Now, if you see these, I think they're looking at a deep multi-theater exercises, simultaneous maneuvers by all PLA, the Navy, the Air Force, and the strategic forces. And they've showcased us, given us a glimpse of the strategy by conducting these exercises in the last 4 or 5 months. Since May or June, I've been seeing this. And, and I find that they have done a great job at it. And what the US has been responding, they've been conducting surveillance aircraft movements, and you have these figures, freedom of navigation patrols. I think we get a good sense of how the Chinese are pitted against the United States. And they've made enough note of how the US operates, and they have their own ways and of responding. What about the Indian Ocean? I would put that strategy and rather label it as ocean cooperation and naval presence. And why I suggest this is because they have priority on their mind is the Belt Road Initiative, the 21st Century Silk Road Initiative, Maritime Silk Road, the lend and lease, the infrastructure. It begins from China, Indian Ocean, Africa, Mediterranean, Blue Economic Passage. And they want to link up a number of these corridors. China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the BCIMEC. Again, India fits in, but then how far we are going to go into it, etc., etc. But you find that the Chinese have a clear-cut idea of what they want to do. They're investing enormous amounts of political, diplomatic, and financial capital, and of course military too, into the 21st century maritime. Of course, at the level of naval presence, they have anti-piracy operations. The 36 deployments started 2 months ago. They've been conducting China-Pakistan joint exercises, Sea Guardian, and what was particularly remarkable was the China, Russia, and Iran joined up to call it the Silk Belt exercise. So this is how I look at the Chinese strategy for the Indian Ocean. I thought I'd share these. These pictures are available on the net, and of course, you can draw your own conclusions. One on the tablet on the left is particularly important. We oversee this at the far left. You notice that there's a 330-meter pier that has been constructed. And one picture where I came across, somebody has put an aircraft carrier, suggesting that it is possible to even put out an carrier. So our apprehensions, that is, in terms of carrier operating in the Indian Ocean, I think are coming too slowly and steadily, and we should be able to see those sooner or later next year. But their focus will, let me also caution, a word of caution here is that they will continue to focus on the Western. And of course, you have pictures about Gwadar, which has been a subject for the last almost 3 or 4 decades. We've been talking about it. It is taking shape. And of course, Hambantota is often referred to in our discussions and writing. And the new entry into this port would be the Ream Naval Base, although the Cambodians have denied any such move. But it is fair to assume that it is also one of the many that the Chinese are thinking about. Two important events in October merit our attention. They put out in the public domain a revised draft law on national defense, and General Wei Feng, Minister of National, explains the rationale for it. The old document was pretty old and it needed changes, plus situations were different. And he remarked, international security environment is in a period of heightened strategic rivalry, and China confronted with increasingly complicated security threats and challenges in this space, adjustment to our defense policy. I think these are clear-cut directions come from the political leadership in those many terms. And here, the challenges arise from the United States in particular, or for that matter, Quad, which will be always, lingering at the back of the mind. And one of the commentaries on this particular LND suggests that China could use military to project overseas interests for peacekeeping operations, international rescue, escort duties, and all these things that they've been doing all this time. And another important feature of this LND is restructuring and reforms in defense research and production, acquiring key security technologies in multiple domains. And a week later, the communique of the 5th plenary session, and of course the 14th five-year plan, calls for making significant investments in national defense and armed forces. I think the directions are clear-cut. The Chinese are going to invest a lot of money into building up national defense capabilities. The Navy should be an important beneficiary of this particular policy. And I looked at lots of platforms, technologies which are coming, and what struck me most was the Chinese, particularly the Navy, is now investing a lot in 4th industrial revolution technology, or Industry 4.0. And the Chinese military, and when I look at the whole discourse and debate which is on, they view artificial intelligence critical to their future. Next generation AI plan details the strategy. There's outline goal. Commercial and military entities are being brought in together. 2020, their purpose is to gain parity with the world leaders in AI. I'll talk about this later. 2025, major AI breakthroughs. Emerge as a global leader by 2030. And PLA could graduate into a digitalized force capable of 4IR-enabled ISR and combat operations and logistics. And in this tablet, I put out almost about 12 odd Industry 4.0 technologies. And I find that the Chinese have moved very well in many of them. And others, they're still building up or developing. Things like even kirigami, origami, they're turning into a warigami. That means they're building up structure. They're understanding the Japanese art of folding and cutting to build up their own. And we see that their module, which is going to be carried to the Mars or otherwise the moon, that this is all an example of all that. And there is always hardly a gap between the civil and the military now. Now that the AI is more led by the civilian industry than by the biomimetics, AI, cyber, blockchain, quantum, you name it, and they are in. Now, these two pictures at the top line are instructive. 2016, they fished out this so-called module, the US Navy. And you see the picture on the right. 5 years later, they've replicated, as I said, Chinese platform, but it's modeled on the US line, which is again a feature which I'll talk a little later also. They've come upon it. This is what they're talking about in terms of an uncrewed surface vessel. Of course, the United States has already tested out the Sea Hunter, which made a maiden voyage from mainland US to Hawaii.
Vijay, you have another 3 minutes. Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm coming to that. And you see that a lot of these things are now available to them. Again, I venture to suggest that, if the Chinese, are really excited about what they're producing, they're in a position to even hold a fleet review for themselves with the unmanned or, semi-manned stuff, platforms, etc. So they have enough available to them in terms of variety and capability. Again, this is top level stuff that they're producing, of course, copying generously from the US electromagnetic railgun, hypersonic cruise missiles, lasers, and ESAT. And I get a citation to suggest that Type 055 is a potential platform. Well, what are the broad trends? PLA Navy remains committed to robust shipbuilding and naval modernization, fielding advanced weapons, sensors, command, and control capabilities. I think I could borrow this is literally a mirror image of what I would have said even 5 or 10 years ago. But what is coming up is capability improvement in 4IR, cyber, near space, and counter space. Strategic force is evolving rapidly. They're thinking about moving targets on land and sea, and robust logistic infrastructure, which will be the future. And that is what will feature into the Indian Ocean. At the cost of just sharing with you, my book should be out in another 2 weeks' time. Fourth Industrial Revolution Technologies, Maritime Naval Operations. My conclusion is there is an urgency amongst the Navy to gain ascendancy in 4IR to obtain a favorable naval balance of power. And if I also argue 21st century sea power could be led by intelligent artificial intelligence. And I did a comparative of the US Navy, the PLA Navy, the Indian Navy. I think the Chinese Navy is doing very well, exceedingly well, and comparable with the US Navy. But I think the Indian Navy will probably have to do a lot of catching up. That's my estimate. Finally, our mission-based deployment, I think there's a lot of, Navy should get a lot of accolades for it. And this was the tweet that came out. We have the Indian Ocean covered. Gulf defense to Malabar, again, defense, etc., etc. Indian Navy tweeted 50 ships on vigil 24/7, our area of responsibility, a whole lot of things. I think that's phenomenal, remarkable. And I think yesterday or today we heard that, about the UAVs also coming in from the Americans. But what should merit our urgent attention is PLA Navy reconstituting composition of task forces which are bound for the Indian Ocean. They're going to conduct exercises, operations involving all the 4IR enabled, AI enabled surface, subsurface, and air platforms. This could complicate our force advantage that we enjoy in the Indian Ocean. I think we need to have a real look at the way we're going to conduct our business in the Indian Ocean. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vijay, for that comprehensive first talk. Because while we are trying to understand the current developments in China, it's important to also to understand the trade aspects and the technological aspects that's driving the Chinese aspirations and ambitions, not just in its neighborhood, but also beyond the Straits of Malacca, as it has made forays into Indian Ocean region, Africa, and beyond. Thank you very much for this. I'm sure there'll be many questions, but we'll be taking up those questions towards the end of this. The next speaker is Commodore Venugopal, who is a recent addition to the Chennai Center for China Studies, who also has wide experience in the Navy. And we are very happy to have him with us. And he is going to look at another dimension, which was also mentioned in this morning inaugural, related to the BRI. So he's going to look at the outreach through BRI into continents across oceans to serve their long-term and short-term aspirations. Commodore Venu, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm greetings from Kanandevan Hills down south. The term BRI is probably the most researched acronym in today's internet. I will be covering the strategic outreach of China through BRI into our immediate neighborhood in Indian Ocean. Next slide, please. I intend to see the Chinese objectives for their Belt and Road Initiative, the link between their BRI and the Chinese maritime strategy, look at the key parameters of BRI, outreach of BRI in India's neighborhood, which directly is of concern to us, strategic implications for India, impediments for China on the road ahead, followed by a conclusion. Belt and Road Initiative was formerly known as the One Belt, One Road Initiative. It was focused by China towards global infrastructure development and to expand China's economic and political influence. The initiative was adopted in 2013 and is planned to be completed by 2049, which incidentally coincides with their centennial celebrations of the People's Republic of China formation. Many analysts compare the BRI with the Marshall Plan of 21st century. To recall, the Marshall Plan was implemented by the United States after World War II to rebuild Europe following the devastation caused during the war, and also to prevent the communist influence in Western Europe. Compared to the BRI, the budget towards Marshall Plan was a fraction of the amount being spent for the BRI. The Marshall Plan focused more on a grant basis than on a loan basis, whereas the BRI is fully on the loan scheme. That means there is no question of any grant to any country. Every amount is accounted for as a loan. The Marshall Plan lasted only for 4 years, following which, the plan was fully implemented. What is China's Belt and Road Initiative? Next slide, please. Next slide. What are the key parameters of BRI? 138 countries have signed the MOU for joining the BRI, and China has spent an estimated $200 billion US. Please do not take these figures seriously, because there are many versions of these kind of figures. The expenditure is likely to touch 1.2 to 1.3 trillion by 2027. This is funded by two major banks, the China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China, and the Silk Road Fund. If you can see, there's a think tank who does the research and engineering to support the BRI initiative. Next. Next. What is the link between China's BRI and the Maritime Silk Route? Indian Ocean is a vital trade route for China, as 80% of its energy security pass through Indian Ocean and its vital checkpoints. China is developing its maritime strategy in parallel with BRI to protect and defend its economic interests in Indian Ocean region. Incidentally, the 2020 vision document of China highlighted the need for protection of overseas interests and economic interests as one of the priority areas. PLA Navy first commenced its foray into Indian Ocean in 2008 in the garb of anti-piracy operations at the Gulf of Aden. Normally, a flotilla of 3 ships do a 3 to 4 month trek in the region. Next. I may recall the audience to what Admiral Ter Mahan had to say in 19th century. Whoever controls the Indian Ocean dominates Asia. This ocean is the key to the 7 seas in the 21st century. The destiny of the world will be decided in these waters. It looks as if the Chinese have taken this quote very seriously. This slide shows you the Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region. However, due to paucity of time, I will be only covering the countries which directly affect our strategic interests. Coming on to Bangladesh. Bangladesh adopted a very balanced approach to BRI, although their Chinese investment is around 26 billion US dollars. This is primarily due to the close political and security relationship with China that Bangladesh has maintained a balance. They've developed a seaport, deep sea port at Paira. There's a defense cooperation agreement which was signed in 2002, which facilitated arms and military technology transfer from China to Bangladesh. They're also developing a submarine base for the 2 Ming-class submarines which China had transferred to Bangladesh in 2018, and this base is near Cox's Bazar. Next, please. Moving on to Thailand. Thailand has been a major beneficiary of China. There's a defense cooperation agreement which was signed in 2019, which included purchase of 10 major arms deals and also of 3 diesel electric submarines. One of the arguments of many analysts was the utility of Kra Isthmus. This is a project which was very much in discussion during the last 3 decades, but due to many reasons, the project was shelved, primarily because of the environmental effect, the geopolitical issues, engineering challenges, and the economic benefits were not in consonance with the kind of investment that was required to dredge a 135-kilometer isthmus, which would have saved about 3 days sailing time as this canal is going to bypass the Strait of Malacca. However, Thailand is doing a new study to see the feasibility of building 2 ports on either coast of the peninsula and link it with the railway and motorway. The bottom line is that as of now, the Kra Isthmus project is shelved. Next. Moving on to Myanmar. Myanmar is very important strategically for China's sustenance of energy security. They've implemented 2 major projects in Myanmar. One is the oil pipeline, which runs from Kea Payoh in Myanmar to Kunming in China. It's about 771 kilometers. and the oil discharge is 240,000 barrels per day. There's also a gas pipeline from Kunming to Guizhou to Guangxi, a distance of 2,800 kilometers, capacity being 12 billion cubic meter per year. Myanmar has also got close defense ties with China and have been the benefactor of a lot of arms and ammunition, military technology, training assistance from China. Moving on to Sri Lanka. Hambantota Port is widely discussed in various forums. This was funded by the Chinese to the tune of 85%. The first phase opened in 2010, but the commercial utility of this port has not been up to the expected projection during its planning stage. 70% of the port is leased to China, Chinese Merchant Ports Holding Company, for a period of 99 years. The ROI, as I mentioned, return of investment, is inadequate to offset the Chinese loan payments. Thus, Sri Lanka is always under the wrath of debt trap. Sri Lanka has been a benefactor of military aid from China in terms of military hardware and training since 2007. If one may recall, 2007, Sri Lanka was in a deep flux due to geopolitical reasons. The aid from the West had stopped, and that's the time when Sri Lanka focused towards China. And even now, Sri Lanka maintains that economically they will align with China, but they will be aligned from the security perception with India. Maldives is another major benefactor of Chinese investment in the region. Two islands, Feidu Finolu and Punawasi, had assumed significance over the last couple of years, being places where a Chinese military base could come up. Now the construction in these two islands are complete, and both these islands host commercial resorts, and at the moment there is no sign of any military base. There was a plan to build a joint observation station at Mukunudu, which was scrapped on objection from India. Currently, there is no proof of any Chinese plan for building a military base in Maldives. Gwadar is of important geostrategic significance for China. The China-Pakistan, which is the flagship project of BRI. It links Gwadar by rail and road to Sinjar province. It can bypass Malacca choke point and ensure critical flow by land route, although it may offset the deficiency of energy requirement to a considerable amount. It also facilitates Chinese exports by the shortest route through Indian Ocean. Strategically, a naval presence at Gwadar can be of concern to India and other countries. There are no visible signs of any military buildup in the port, but there are certain very high security areas within the port, which gives an impression that there is some security coming up in that location. A base in Gwadar.
Can you finish in the next 3 minutes? Thank you.
Moving on to Gwadar. Next slide, please. BRI is assumed significance in the African continent. The East Coast is strategically located and serves as an important corridor to link the African continent. The aim being economic integration with landlocked countries in the continent. A defense cooperation with African countries, mainly Tanzania and Kenya, assumes significance even to date. Next slide, please. Djibouti has been an ambitious agenda for maritime trade hub in the Horn of Africa for China. A strategic partnership was signed in 2017, and thereafter they built a naval base at Obok. Next. Obok Naval Base is leased for a period of 10 years, and it is the OTR port for China's anti-piracy flotilla. Its close proximity to US base at Lemonnier, Camp Lemonnier, French and Japanese bases makes it vulnerable for the Chinese to a certain extent. Overseas military base is a strategic shift in Chinese foreign policy, lending muscle to its diplomacy. Next. BRI boosts China's strategic presence in the region, which is the major concern for India. It gives significant geopolitical influence in our neighborhood, and we lose patronage of our neighbors. It undermines our sovereignty claims on disputed border territories as CPEC passes through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and connects China's Xinjiang autonomous region with Balochistan province. Next. Connectivity projects are very close to India's continental and maritime borders, affecting our security interests. Strategic implications of digital Silk Road is also a matter of concern.
Venu, please wind up in the next 2 minutes. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Next. PRI has increased the outreach and economic gains of China. The recipient countries have benefited. Whether they can utilize their hold in the region is to further their military ambitions remains a question. Next. It's unlikely scenario of Indian Ocean region countries allowing China to use their sovereign territory for military usage under the current circumstances. Strategically, a Chinese naval reach into Indian Ocean region is unlikely to shift the power dynamics for the foreseeable future, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Venu. There is a comprehensive presentation on BRI, both the strategic impact as well as the impact that it has in our neighborhood, militarily and also in terms of trade. The debate on BRI is never going to end, because within the Chennai Center for China Studies and the National Maritime Foundation, we've had extensive debate, and there are always, debates on the viability of BRI, on how it will impact us, and what can India do to counter this. In that breath, what was mentioned this morning in the inaugural address of the Sagar, South Security and Growth for All in the region, and other measures are there. But all these will be found wanting because India does not have the economic potential of China. So we'll discuss this and a lot more in the Q&A session. I'm very happy now to invite Captain Nitin Agarwala, who is a serving sailor cum scholar, and he has done extensive studies on the deep seabed mining and the potential thereof, both in terms of China and us. You will recollect that more and more nations are looking at oceans for meeting their demands, whether it's energy, whether it's living resources, or whether it is even minerals that we are going to talk about now. So there's a phenomenal amount of technology that goes into it, a phenomenal amount of trying to understand the ocean environment. And from that point of view, the news that came out just a couple of days ago about China having broken many records in going down to something like 10 kilometers underwater and trying to extract samples from there, tells you that they have advanced considerably in terms of their technological capability. To hear more about this, over to Captain Nitin Agarwala, who has 20 minutes to cover this topic. Thank you. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I will start off straight away with my presentation. which talks about what advances China has made in deep seabed mining towards, and what are the security implications as far as of India is concerned. Now, in the morning session, in the last two sessions that we have had and the inaugural session, we have found that, and we have heard how China has made serious advances as far as the maritime domain is concerned. And that has been primarily because of the fact that they, from a landward looking nation, they have started looking towards the sea. So keeping that in mind, I thought I will break down the entire presentation in the basic heads as shown in front of you.
Nitin, you can go to full screen. They are only seeing a half screen. Please go to full screen.
Okay, sir. Does that help, sir? Hello? Hello? Sir, does that help now?
It's in the same format, but it does not matter. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I've broken up my entire presentation as shown on the slide. I will be talking about how and what China has gone ahead with. Now, this has all happened because China has slowly over the years become an economic giant. And it is said, and it is believed, and analysis says that slowly it will reach a situation wherein it will overtake even the United States of America. Now, if you look at the kind of imports and exports that China has been following, the imports have been much lesser than what the exports are. And these all exports are mainly driven by industrialization. This leads to a very large extent of minerals and raw materials which are being used by the industry, and the consumption is increasing on a daily basis. So how do the minerals come about, or how do the resources come about for China? China as a nation is rich in its minerals, in its resources, but it cannot meet all its requirements from within its country itself. And that is why it needs to get into importing these minerals. And if you see in front, there are close to about 151 countries from where it imports various kinds of minerals, which account for nearly about 143 million USD. So there is a need for China to diversify and see how best it can offset this import cost, and it can become a little more self-dependent. The next available opportunity is that to start looking at minerals which are available in the deep sea. The screenshot in front of you shows the disposition of the minerals across the seafloor. There are basically three types of minerals: the polymetallic nodules, the polymetallic sulfides, and the cobalt-rich crusts. China has done enough and more of studies on all three of them, and we find that they have really succeeded in getting some great wayheads and trying to get those minerals.
Nitin,
Now,
please advance your slide. We cannot see it. We are only still stuck with the second slide. Please do advance it.
Sir, I'm advancing, but
All
it's
right.
not moving.
Now it's okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So if you look at the I'm out of the presentation mode now. Okay. These are the types of minerals that we are talking about. And if we look at the polymetallic sulfide, we find that they are available and contain a lot of minerals which are shown in front of you. You have also the cobalt crust and the massive sulfides. So this basically requires that there is a need for studying the ocean and the ocean floor, and then only we will be able to do any information gathering, or we can understand what is happening on the seafloor and whether the minerals can be obtained. Now, there are enough and more of marine data collection processes which have been tried out and which have been implemented throughout the globe. And some of them are flashed in front of you. The basic requirement of all these data collection is for a variety of marine related scientific requirements, and understanding how our oceans behave and what effect they have on the land. These uses can be for weather forecasting, pollution and tsunamis, for search and rescue, for oil and gas development, for 3D mapping, and for sensing. One needs to understand that for sensing and 3D mapping can be used for military purposes also. Now, as far as the sensing is concerned, there is an involvement wherein you can undertake these surveys differently and legally and illegally in different areas of our oceans. If it is in the EEZ, we assume the regulations say that commercially and scientific surveys require prior permission, while the military surveillance and the surveys have not been clearly defined, and different countries have different views and opinions. As far as the US is concerned, permission is required if permission is not required if you have to do any military survey and surveillance, while as far as China is concerned, they feel that the permission is essential. Now, if we were to look at the deep seas, then the survey is absolutely free. The world over, the permission is permitted, and there is no inhibition or any stoppage with respect to the survey to be conducted. But when you talk about mining in the deep sea, you need permission from the International Seabed Authority. When you talk of mining, again, two broad areas are broken down into. One is the exploration and one is the exploitation. The exploration is basically trying to find out whether a particular mineral is available, and that always follows a scoping survey. While the exploitation, for exploitation, you need to have exploration rights from the ISA before you can look at exploitation. Herein, it is to be noted that China has made advances as far as the exploration are concerned, and they have got close to 5 areas across the world wherein exploration has been permitted to them. Exploitation, unfortunately, has still not been developed by the ISA in terms of rules and regulations, so nobody is going to do it in the near future, at least. So now let us look at the advances that China has made. Now, China started off their whole interest by putting in place the national plans on mineral resources, which allowed them mergers and acquisitions of various companies or various infrastructures outside their country so that they could develop the expertise and the knowledge as and when required. Now, the slide in front shows what is the kind of mergers and acquisitions they have done over the years, and you will find that they have done across the world and in different fields, mainly not only in minerals but all heavy industries per se. The other area which they have developed, which Dr. Sakuja mentioned, was shipbuilding strength. Now, he spoke of only the naval component, but I would also like to bring to notice that there is a Coast Guard component, the research fleet component, the flag merchant ships component, and the fishing vessel fleet component. All of this have gone or increased by leaps and bounds as far as China is concerned. And today, China stands at a situation wherein, as far as fishing is concerned, they control nearly half of the world's fishing activities. Hence, we can comfortably say that maritime China has developed in the fields of technology, assets, and skill. And it has become a matter of concern for countries, especially those in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, if we look at the technological capabilities that they have developed, in 2011, it was only in 2011 that this really started some serious deep sea research and technology development under the Chinese Academy of Studies. I do not wish to say that the Chinese were not active in deep sea mining earlier. They were one of the pioneer nations, but yes, the main development happened only in 2011. From till 2016, they had completed close to about 39 oceanic expeditions, especially in the Indian Ocean, for the polymetallic sulfides, rare earth minerals, seawater, and geological samples. Also, to support all this study and research, they developed many institutes along their coastlines and developed developmental zones, which looked at high-tech marine research equipment, innovative developments, and logistic bases. This resulted into a number of technological equipments being developed. And as was mentioned just by Commodore Menon, a lot of these equipment have been able to go up to depths of close to about 10,000 meters. And believe me, they are all in-house development. They are not something which have been borrowed or bought from the world market. Yes, reverse engineering has been done in most of them, but most of them are now homegrown and they are self-sufficient in handling it in totality. Now, if we were to look at the legal aspect of it, as mentioned, the exploration and the exploitation is handled separately. The exploration, the rules are in vogue as far as ISA is concerned. Exploitation rules are still under discussion. But as far as the detailing of the rules is concerned, the detailed rules have to be provided by the sponsoring state. For in this case, it is China. For their own country, they have been in a position to put their laws in place, and they are all set to begin exploitation as and when ISA gives them the permission. When talking about learning, they have been outgoing in terms of that they have ensured that from the Solara mines in the PNG, they get complete rights of processing the ores which will be collected there. The thought process is that as and when the mines are all the ores that are pulled out or are retrieved by PNG, they will be imported to China, where they will be processed, and the processing industry will also benefit in the country. Construction of the PSV for the PNG was undertaken by a Chinese shipyard, and it was based on a Singapore design. But the kind of learning that the country has developed by getting involved in this construction is phenomenal. Similarly, the equipment, the auxiliary cutting machines and the seafloor production tools which have been manufactured, which have been used for the PNG, they all have been originally manufactured by the Soil and Machine Dynamics Limited of UK and were delivered in 2017. But the Soil Machine Dynamic company has been taken over by a Chinese company in 2015, and again the learning goes back to China. The next area of interest which comes out as far as the development is concerned is using a dual use development area, which is a blue ocean information network system, which is something like a buoy. Now, this buoy is put in the sea, and it has got it is an e-station in totality. This has been demonstrated in the North-South China Sea in 2016 and 19, and now it is being extended into the full of South China Sea, the East China Sea, and areas far away from China. As far as China is concerned, they are projecting it only as an environmental monitoring tool and a communication system. But one needs to understand that this tool has the capability of military surveillance too. In the same breath, one would say that it is not alone this much. It is their research vessels, their survey vessels also have increased the number of activities in the Indo-Pacific region. The screenshot here, the green shots are the ones which are the Chinese vessels, and you would find that they are increasing by the numbers on a more or less daily basis. And it is this interest and this involvement which shows that they have more of doing in this region. A little bit of discussion has already happened on the BRI. I will just reiterate that China has started creating infrastructure in this region, and what it has done is basically to avoid the Malacca dilemma. But this in return has resorted to debt diplomacy, which in return has forced China to develop its navy, so that as and when there is a requirement to protect its infrastructure in lands far away from China, they would be ready to do so. Now, when we come to the surveillance of the EEZ, China has been involved therein also. So far, like we discussed, that China has maintained that military surveillance requires permission. However, they have been debating as far as this interpretation is concerned. And recent cases of 2018 in Palau, PNG in 2019, Philippines in 2019, Andaman and Nicobar Islands in 2019, Australia in 2020 have shown that there is a difference of opinion in that interpretation, and they are not following the rules as they want to exhibit to the world. Similarly, the Chinese fishing boats, as I mentioned, they are controlling close to 50% of the world fishing. They are now found in both inside and outside EEZs of various companies, of various countries, as far as America also. Now, in the IOR itself, there are close to about 600 Chinese vessels which are operating just outside India's EEZ between 2015 and 2019, keeping in mind that they don't want to create ruckus and they don't want to create flutter that they are operating in somebody else's EEZ. But the very presence of these fishing vessels is a matter of concern as far as India is concerned. Now, so this brings us to what is the area of interest in the Indian Ocean region. The two black areas is what I have marked out. This area, the bottom area, is the one which has already, for which China has already got the exclusive exploration rights from ISA, while the 90 East Ridge, which is a CRC ridge, a cobalt-rich area, for this explorations are right now in progress, and it will not be far before they go to ISA for exploration rights. How does it matter to everybody of us? We have to note that this is close to Malacca Strait. Whatever trade moves into the South China Sea and to US from the Indian Ocean moves through the Malacca Strait, and this region of the CRC region or the 90s region falls right in between. So they have much better legal rights to be here than what they have now. And at that moment of time, it will be very difficult to counter or to say anything to them. So effectively, what are the security concerns, or what security concerns come out of this? What disturbs India as far as China is concerned is that India finds that there is an increased military presence of China in the Indian Ocean region. The fishing vessels have increased in India's EEZ and outside it, and exclusive exploration rights have been taken by China in the Indian Ocean, and the second one is being tried for. At the end of it, India also realizes that the growing Chinese infrastructure in this region would increase the deployment of the PLA Navy, which again cannot be stopped. And such deployments create a great imbalance, create vulnerability to the submarine cables, increase the surveillance of military assets in the Indian Ocean of the Indian assets per se, and also provide China a reason and a way ahead to provide false floor and salinity charts, which could eventually result into accidents of underwater vessels and affect naval operations. One has to understand that since it is a unified world, we do tend to share maps and charts of which are made available across the globe, and there would be times and moments when these charts made by China possibly would be shared by the other countries also. So what is the way ahead? The way ahead is that one needs to understand that technically, legally, movement of China in the Indian Ocean region cannot be stopped or avoided. However, surveillance, as far as surveillance is concerned, if the vessel is above water, it can be monitored. But if it is underwater, and especially for science, it definitely cannot be monitored. As far as underwater surveillance is concerned, it may be illegal, but it definitely cannot be challenged in any court of law. And since it is a known fact that the Chinese fishing vessels are a state-controlled element, then controlling our own movement or our Indian assets movement in the Indian Ocean itself, just by being scared by the Chinese fishing vessel, may not be a good way ahead, because it will hamper our own working. Thus, we need to look at legal options and alternates which will make us to achieve what we want in terms of being a deterrent rather than getting into a confrontation. As discussed, or as we can understand, there are no outright solutions as far as the concerned problem is concerned. Some possible alternatives are that we can position a survey vessel or a research vessel in the close proximity of where the Chinese vessels are, and that would act as a deterrent. We should necessarily undertake detailed and extensive studies for the CRC in the NER region. And once we have done that, we need to apply for exclusive rights, so that as and when China gets its rights, we are also there to contest it. We are also in a region which is close by, and then we can at least make our presence felt by just being there, nothing more than that. Since movement in international waters cannot be stopped, just by close monitoring and presence is more than enough, is what I would say. And for all this, since our regular assets cannot be put to use or put to that extensive deployment, we need to get involved with maritime drones, both surface and underwater, and that would make our life simpler. The IOC IOR, which has been built and which has been commissioned, should be tasked to monitor and track Chinese assets. Some of it may be happening, may not be happening, but we need to look at how best we can do it. Today, we do not have an underwater domain awareness strategy as far as the country is concerned. Even if we have, it is not really available for people to understand. So we need a comprehensive underwater domain awareness strategy, and that should be made public so that there is a certain amount of deterrence which is created in the mind of China itself. And at the end of it, like Admiral Amba had mentioned, we need to encourage multi-aligned diplomatic cohesion and cooperation with other Indo-Pacific partners on all maritime issues such that we are able to move in one direction and counter China. In conclusion, I would say that so far India has enjoyed an unhindered and exclusive patronage in the Indo-Ocean region. As things change and new powers emerge, we have to either accept or confront the opposition that is there. However, confronting it without provocation is not likely to happen. China so far has focused on developing its maritime power and has this is mainly, as we understand, is due to an increased demand of raw material and energy. As far as capacity is concerned, they have already done it. In terms of capability, they are doing it now by deploying themselves in the Indian Ocean region. It may disturb countries in this region, but there is very little that can be done. India, on the other side, can just exercise restraint and caution while being ready for any eventualities if they come. And stepping up own surveillance and deterrence is the best possible option. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin. Again, in the series of 3 presentations that we've had in trying to understand the contemporary developments of China, it's extremely useful to understand what they are doing in the underwater domain. We also have another speaker later who will be talking about underwater domain awareness. So the questions on these also could be reserved for later. I also have another request, which is all those who are not in the chair or as speakers are kindly requested to switch off their cameras. Otherwise, it does interfere in the bandwidth. This is a request. So I think all the 3 presenters have made some excellent presentation in terms of trying to understand the developments as far as China is concerned, whether it is through the Belt and Road Initiative or through the capacity and capability that it's being added in the shipbuilding capacity or research vessels. You saw the numbers that were flashed by Nitin. There were 19 plus research vessels, and a lot of them are in our neighborhood. We've had issues where we've had to register a protest about their presence. So this is something that tells us what the landscape is in terms of trying to understand the developments, and more importantly, how it would impinge on India's preparedness, security. So with this, I'll let the floor open, and there are already some questions. There are 1 or 2 questions about Andaman Nicobar. They will not be taken up because we have a separate session where a former commander-in-chief who was there in Andaman Nicobar would be talking about the readiness and how it would impact China's advances from the Pacific into the Indian Ocean. But rest of the questions will be channeled by Bala or Aishwarya, and they will also indicate who amongst the panel would be taking up these questions. I would request all the questions to be clubbed together and indicated to the speakers. I'm sure the panelists also would have seen these questions in the chat box, so I'm sure they are ready. So over to you, Bala. Are you there?
Sir, the question.
Yeah.
Yes, Aishwarya, please.
Yes, so I will be reading out the questions. The first question is directed to Dr. Vijay Sakuja, and it's asked by Danesh Sankyayan. He asks, Sir, do we need to focus on midget submarines? Is it necessary? And he also asks, Sir, do you think Russia will be a rival of China as Russia is expanding in the IOR in Africa?
Also, I would recommend, Aishwarya, that all the questions are read out to the speakers so that they can respond together. Otherwise, we'll waste a lot of time.
Okay, sir.
Please read out if there are any more questions, and likewise club them together and address it to the speaker who is there.
Okay, sir. One more question to Dr. Vijay Sakuja by Lieutenant, I'm sorry, by Colonel Hariharan. Thank you for China's development of plan. How do you read plans, weaknesses in operations in IOR? The next questions are for Commodore Venugopal. It's asked by Colonel Hariharan. What is China's take on India's plan to develop in Andaman and Nicobar as a watchdog for China's operations in IOR? What is Bangladesh's reaction? And another question for Commodore Venugopal is by Dr. Bamadev Sigdal. As India argues that through BRI, China is encircling India and South Asia, what are the strategies of India? The next question is directed to Captain Nitin Agrawala by Danesh Sankyayan. Sir, is there any alternative way of Malacca for China? Is his question.
All right, just I will request all the speakers to respond, commencing from Dr. Vijay Sakuja. Also, the question on Andaman Nicobar will not be addressed as we have a separate session for that. And thereafter, Commodore Venu, followed by Nitin Agarwala, will respond to the questions that have been raised. Thank you. Vijay.
Thank you. Very useful questions. First, let me begin by the reference to midgets. I think midgets are a pocket. They're gone. And they were almost about 3 to 4 decades old. We're talking about unmanned vessels, which can be even controlled by satellite. The midget is out of question. Chinese are going to come. They're already thinking in those many terms of swarm underwater drones. That will be the so-called the core structure that they'll be building up. They will have a mothership. Submarines probably need not launch even torpedoes. These will be suicidal drones. A variety of combinations can be made out. I think midgets we must not even think about. We should think about how these 4IR enabled platforms, which could be operating by themselves, autonomous, or with a mother or remotely controlled. That will be the shape of things. Russia competing with China in Africa. I think that'll be. Taking the imagination too far. Russia doesn't have the kind of financial capability to undertake, and also it doesn't have the expertise in terms of infrastructure development, given that much of the Russian infrastructure development has taken place in the higher latitude, and they will be proficient in building infrastructure which are ice class or for that matter, which are of that kind of a terrain. But to build infrastructure which is typical in the tropics or in this kind of equatorial belt will be something which the Chinese have shown and showcased that they have the ability and capability to deliver, notwithstanding the debt traps and whole lot of things that they attract with their projects. I think it will not be possible. However, let me also add in the same breath that the Russians are, I wouldn't call them coming back into the business. They're making a foray, and they have just signed an agreement for Port Sudan. So they want to bring about a logistical and a technical support arrangement where the vessels will come. The Russians have been coming on regular basis. They come on their annual exercises, make port calls, variety of things. They do exercise, I guess, Indira with us, right? So variety of things happen. They visit other ports, also goodwill. But to compete with the Chinese, I would say no. What about the weaknesses of Chinese weaknesses for operations in the Indian Ocean? Are plenty of them. But then these gaps are being filled up very at a rapid pace, I would suggest. Let's look at where would the data come from for their underwater operations. This is very critical. At the heart of any underwater operation is data. So data is coming in survey vessels, which Nitin also mentioned in terms of the number of voyages that these exploration vessels are doing or scientific research vessels are doing. They're collecting data. Another important source and a good, reliable source would be traffic. We don't know as yet whether this has been shared or not. And the technology that they have in terms of, particularly in the field of IR4, that is big data and big data analytics and enabled AI, you would find that they would have built up enough data in terms of a library or whatever you may call it, the data bank, to conduct their operations. I must also caution that we should be anticipating a number of Indian Ocean littorals permitting Chinese to carry out marine archaeology surveys. They come with the proposal of recalling the Changho voyages, and this is a case which is happening in Sri Lanka. We'll have to be very, very careful because all we find marine archaeology is part of the cultural, so-called cultural belt, right, called cultural diplomacy. But then there is always a dual use, so we have to be very, very careful about that. I think I've answered most of it.
So you're muted.
Thank you. I was saying that in case Venu is not there, Nitin, you can address the question
Yes.
and wait for Venu to come back.
Yes, I will. Thank you for the question, Danish. Your question was whether there is an alternate for Malacca. Yes, there is. And I think we just need to look at the northern side, the Arctic belt, wherein the Arctic Ocean is being opened up, and China is trying to develop its own resources such that it is able to use that route. Then there is also the Lombok Strait through the Indonesian islands, and China tends to use that. Then there is also the CPEC, which was mentioned by Commodore Menon, that CPEC is also an alternate of the Malacca dilemma itself, which China is forcing its development with. Similarly, since all this Malacca dilemma is all about getting energy resources to China, they have built up a port, or rather, they have got a fuel transfer terminal um, in Myanmar, as again was mentioned by Commodore Menon. So I think there are a lot of alternates. It is just that they are trying to put, I would say, their eggs in different baskets so that they have a much better play and they are able to do it. But at the end of it, like was mentioned in the inaugural address, seaward involvement, seaward looking out is necessary if you have to control the world or if you have to be big. And that is what China is doing. And that is why, in spite of Malacca dilemma, they are still going out all out with respect to their explorations in the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin. Now Venu is back. I can see him back. Venu, you can skip the question on Andaman Nicobar because we have a separate session for that. So you can take on the other question that was posed to you. And also, only one point about what Nitin said. Within the Chennai Center for China Studies and also in some of the forums in National Maritime Foundation, we have made it a point to refer to the so-called CPEC as China POK Economic Corridor. Because otherwise, we do not want to lend legitimacy to calling it as China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It is not Pakistan. Of course, there are different ways of describing why we use that term. But we consciously, within our think tank, at least here, are always referring to this as China POK Economic Corridor. So, the idea is to solve some doubts and also ensure that we have our claims intact. Venu, over to you with that.
I stand corrected, sir.
No problem. Because there's a large audience here, I thought I'll convey that sentiment so that all of us refer to it correctly in our future dialogue. Thank you so much. Venu, all yours.
I can see one question in the chat box. That's about the threats to India from China through Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So I'll answer the question in two parts. One is that we have to focus now on our neighborhood first policy. That's most important to counter the Chinese engagement in the region. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, we do have a cordial relationship, and more often than not, Bangladesh has clarified in many forums that notwithstanding economic or military cooperation with China, India continues to be the focus for Bangladesh, and similarly for Sri Lanka as well. Now, both these, as far as the Chinese submarine base in Bangladesh is concerned, that's in Cox's Bazar, I would say that although there is so much of noise about it in various strategic forums, Bangladesh has clearly mentioned that it is primarily for the maintenance and training of their submarine crew, and it is not for basing of Chinese submarines. That's one part. The second part is that if you ask me, when China intends to use if at all they want to use a base in Bangladesh or in Sri Lanka, more than that, the Sri Lanka is more actually, they're well within the range of our Air Force strike aircrafts, and overseas base without credible all-round defense is more of a liability than an asset. That's a factor which we need to note. If you've seen the chain of US bases in the region, there's a fair networking of bases, starting off from Bahrain, down to Duqm, down to Diego Garcia, then to Singapore, and with the air element at Qatar, and also the army element, expeditionary forces, which can be deployed in the region. There is a fair amount of networking which is required if you want to stage out-of-area operations, which I feel, in my view, China is far behind as of now. Probably they may develop a capability of expeditionary or sea lift capability and overcome these deficiencies if they want to go with their hegemonic intent. Thank you. I hope I have answered.
Thank you, Venu. In any case, I would just like to bring it to the notice of audience that there are many more sessions, and we are trying to cover all aspects of trying to decipher China in the maritime domain. So it's just the beginning, but I am very happy that both the inaugural session and the very first session has laid the foundation for some very useful discussions in the future. I must thank all the panelists for the wonderful presentations that they made, and also for sticking to the time. We are on time. I did allow a little bit of overlap to allow for questions and answers because it's important. And I've also disallowed some questions which will be taken up later. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, and over to Shashi again.